Hello, Redar. This is my feedback to your mock listening test. Now, first of all, let me say I looked at your notes. They're quite good, and your final notes are very different than the first notes, which is good because that's what we are assessing. In the exam, do the same thing. Make sure your final notes are substantially different than your first note, just like they are for this mock exam. So you did a good job there. Another thing is, if you go back to the guidelines, you will see that as part of your notes in that same document, you should include a short explanation, maybe 3 or 4 sentences or so, explaining how your notes changed from first to final notes. In other words, you'll be talking about what you did to the final notes to change the first notes, right? What you deleted, what you included, what you organized, those kinds of things. It does not have to be a very long explanation. That should be part of that same document with the notes. Okay, now let's look at your summary. You got everything here. I would include the name of the speaker just to start with. Later on you can talk about the speaker if you want to, but in the first sentence I would include his name. Now, as far as the main idea, I will accept it, but his idea is not that they're not perfect. It's just that they have some surprising habits. I think you're better off saying that. When you say that they have bad habits, it could be anything. I mean, anything is a bad habit. Smoking is a bad habit. Insulting, hitting people is a bad habit. Drinking and driving is a bad habit. That's not what he's talking about. He's saying there are surprising habits of original thinkers. And some of them are, for instance, what looks like procrastination is actually an integral part of the creative process. So you could say something like that to make it clearer. To somebody who hasn't seen the video, it should be very clear what it's about right from the go, right from the first sentence. Okay? Whatever you have later on is quite good. The only thing I would say, stay away from numbers, from examples, and any kind of evidence. So other than this number, I think you've done good. You have cohesive devices. You have, I think you need to use more reporting verbs. So, and you would use the present tense, not the past. And again, other than this, which is an example of evidence, the rest you've really focused on the ideas. That's what you need to do. So that's good. But again, just include some phrases like another point the speaker makes, or another one of the surprising habits the speaker mentions is something like that. Use a bit more of those reporting verbs. Okay, but you've done a good job overall here. You've mentioned the ideas. That's fine. I don't see really a problem here. One thing that was not clear, the only thing I would say in terms of the supporting ideas, here you talked about doubt, about fear, not being afraid to fail, and all these things he did mention. There was one thing about, he was saying that original thinkers are often not first movers, but they wait to see what's out there, what's available, a product or a service in the market, and then they improve on that. They don't necessarily create an idea from scratch. So I kind of missed that here. They kind of play the waiting game. He said they're late to the party. Of course, you don't have to use his phrasing. You could use your own words. But I think that's also a very important idea. That's surprising about them, is that they're not first necessarily to create products or services. They wait to see what's out there, what's available, and then they improve on that. So I think you could add that. But even the way it is, you have mentioned enough supporting ideas, so you're in good shape. Again here, the second part of your conclusion is quite good. I would work on the first part as well. Again, it's not about bad habits. It's more about surprising habits. right? For instance, what looks like procrastination is actually a part of the creative process, something like that. So I would work on this a little bit, but the ending is good. So overall the summary is good, no problem there. Now let's look at the evidence. They are also full of doubts. I wouldn't say they're full of doubts, but they're also prone to doubting or self-doubt or whatever. But they do not stop at doubting, but look for another good option. Yeah. But that doesn't stop them from looking for other good options, right? Do not stop at doubting is a little bit not very grammatical actually, because it means something else. Don't stop at doubting, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense here. That doesn't stop them from finding other options, right? But I get the idea. So you've started, that's what you need to do in the exam. Start with the supporting idea and then say what he uses. And you've done that here, so no problem with your identification paragraph. Just do that for the exam and you should be fine. Now let's look at the evidence here. The evidence is not sufficient because the speaker did not mention which research this conclusion came from, the object of the research experiment, and the detailed details, okay, you need to clean that up, of the environmental process. What do you mean environmental process? I think you need to explain here. Was not given. I like your thinking though. He should have given more specific details and more information about whatever this means. But I like the way you've explained it, so that's what you should do in the exam as well. Just make it more clear and more tidy. What do you mean the environmental process? What could be the environmental process here, right? So you need to explain that a little bit. I mean, are we talking about the environment? What are we talking about? What kind of environment? But that's what you need to do in the exam. You need to say why, and you need to find very specific faults. So concrete data probably is what you want to say here, right? Which research the conclusion came from, very good. So that's exactly what you need to do in the exam. Very concrete drawbacks of why it's not sufficient. Just rephrase this so it's clear what you're talking about, because I don't know what environmental process are you talking about. The environmental process of the experiment, or of what? Which environmental process? Of the study of what? The evidence is somewhat relevant, okay? Because the 4 different browsers do have different flaws, and the difference between active installation and inbuilt computer, okay, fine, which is relevant. It can indeed reflect that the originals tend to actively, okay, very nice. You've said it very well, but look at how many words you're spending here. That's a good strategy to say it's relevant because of this. It's not relevant, however, because of that. But you see, you have no space now to say why it's not relevant. You said it's somewhat relevant, and you explain why it's relevant, which is a good explanation, but you look at how many words you wasted. Instead of that, here, you should say very briefly. It's somewhat relevant because the choice of browsers can indeed indicate the capacity to show initiative. That's it. You don't need to say anything more. Now, you explain, however, it's not relevant because of blah blah. You see, that's what you need to do. When you say it's somewhat relevant, in one sense it's relevant, in another sense it isn't. You have to show why it's not relevant, okay? So be very economical here, and that will give you more space to comment on why it's not so relevant, okay? That will make your answer really strong. On the other hand, the evidence is not representative. Okay. The choice to use a different browser is also caused by other factors, such as personal usage habit. Okay, fine. This is fine. I would accept your answer, no problem. But look at again how many words you've spent here. If you can find another reason instead of this, just find another reason. Up to here, you could say the choice of browser is not exactly relevant because there may be other factors, such as preferences, full stop. Now, after that, what you can do, you can basically talk about, sorry, my computer. Basically, you can talk about another reason why it's not representative. And when we talk about representativeness, we're asking ourselves, is that a typical example? Whatever evidence and example he gives, is that typical? So in this case, when he says he had his own self-doubts, and then the browser, you mentioned the browser. Well, how about the self-doubts? Is he a typical example? You can say the speaker talks about his own self-doubt in writing a book. Is that a representative? Is that a typical example of the creative process of all original thinkers? You could definitely attack that. Okay, that will make it again very strong. I don't know what my computer is doing today with these notifications. Sorry. So that's what you need to do. It's a good idea to mention the browser reason, but also you could attack the first evidence, which is his, we say here, the speaker's usage. The self-doubt leads to freezing, and this one, right? Why is that not typical? Why is that not representative? Okay, but even what you've done here is actually quite good, so I don't see a problem with this. You've done a very good job of addressing all three aspects of the evidence, and you've understood what each of them means, so you don't have a problem here. I would just say, to make the paragraph even stronger, reduce the word count so that you have more space to add more stuff to make it even better. But even as it is quite good. All of your paragraphs are actually good. So I think you're in good shape, Jadar. Looks like you will do well. Good luck on the exam.